Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. And lately, when I go on the road to see my favorite band, Circles Around the Sun, I always am interested in the acts that come on to open for them because I recognize that Circles is taking the insecure path, which is actually the secure path. And what I mean by that is just getting their sound to a point where it is absolutely optimal and also just functioning as one living organism. And I recognize that the cats that they bring on tour with them are also aspiring for that, and in some ways have been to the top of the mountain and maybe to the bottom of the mountain, but they are here now. And I had a chance to see my next guest and his band a couple of times in New England, and so many things running through my mind. But as I really did a little more research on my guest, I realized that he is constantly seeking, constantly questioning, and really got the memo that life is one long journey. You don't figure anything out, and even at the end of the line, whenever that is, you're still searching. The bottom line is my guest has clearly found his purpose in life as a sonic expander. He recognizes now, after some travails on the musical circuit and different things in his personal life, about how to surround himself with people that are ultimately going to form one living, breathing unit on the bandstand. I got a chance to see this. He's a multi-instrumentalist and really, on a good day, always smiling. Rich, Ruth, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Oh man, thank you. That was nice. I appreciate that.
I appreciate you, man. I just want you to talk to the audience a little bit about, like, what were the major reasons for you to get off the road a few years ago? Was it just the fact that the music was not inspiring? Was the road eating you alive? Or, the floor is yours. I've talked to enough of the older cats to know that the road can really eat you up. I just wanted you to talk about that experience.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of a combination of things. It sort of, I guess, the trajectory I had been on leading up to that was sort of a natural thing because I had played in this band for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years, coming out of college, moved to Nashville with these guys, and we hit it hard and toured a lot. And I mean, there was like at any point 8 to 12 of us in this band. So it was like nobody was making money. We were just playing everything we could. But yeah, that kind of eventually everyone's lives kind of crept in, and it was just hard to keep that many things straight in like a fully kind of equally collaborative setting. And then I was playing with other bands, and it was a combination of getting sort of fatigued and not feeling as inspired touring, and just kind of a natural stop to some of these projects I was working on. So it kind of just, about a year before COVID, sort of that world just kind of slowed down for me. It wasn't that I didn't want to do it. It just
No, I did.
Yeah, it just kind of took a natural pause.
Was your role, I mean, it sounds like kind of like a big ensemble. Were you, in some way, shape, or form, a leader of the band? Were you composing original music? And also, can you just talk about that sort of road dog experience prior to COVID? I mean, the world, it just seemed like it got turned on its head a little bit coming out. But what was it? What was maybe a high point? Ultimately, I remember talking to the late great Kofi Burbridge, O'Teal's brother, and he was talking about being on the road with this band, and the weather was rough, and they were all just fatigued and not really in a great mood. But they were really just tired. They got to a bar, and it was like, nobody really cared whether they were there or not. But that fatigue that set in sort of put them in an altered state of consciousness to a degree, and they wound up just blazing this show. And and it's like, and some people talk about being physically ill, and yet these things don't sound comfortable to the layperson and yet, sometimes the weirdest moments make for the most rewarding times. And I just wonder what a high point for you was, and if you were a leader in any way of that group.
Yeah. I mean, it was, so the band was called Kansas Bible Company, and we all went to college together, and I mean, there was 10 or 11 of us, and we kind of just wrote everything all together. I mean, it would usually start with like one person's idea or song, and then we'd kind of just bash our heads together in a room for a lot of time, trying to like navigate having that many people and like arranging it and stuff. But it was, it was a really beautiful like collaboration, and taught me a lot about touring and working with other people and like how not to do it in some ways.
Yeah, no. Can you talk about? You don't have to mention names, but I think that's the most. What did you learn not to do? What's one thing?
Well, I feel like it just, everything I'm doing now was informed by, 6 or 7 years of kind of just jumping into the fire of wanting to be in a touring band and not caring about money, not caring about, just saying yes to every single thing we could do. And so, I mean, it's like, it's really helped shape like what we're out here doing. And the fact, it's like, saying what we say yes to is all dictated by those years of just like, it just wasn't easy, but you got to cut your teeth and learn from it.
I have to get this on the table. I mean, I'm just wondering if I'm just naive and a couple of maybe your promotion people or your record company knew Circles. How did you wind up on that tour? Because obviously, based on the content and the photos, I mean, it was cathartic in so many ways for you and them. But I just wonder, like to me, like, there's a lot of lonely avenues, but in music and the life of a musician. But how did that come to conception?
Yeah, from what I understand.
Again, it had nothing to do. So what I'm saying is, it was beyond it. Nothing that you did, really.
No. I should confirm this with like John or Dan and see what the actual story is. But I don't know if you caught their run with the Color Green opening.
Yeah, I saw clips. I didn't, but see, that was, again, thank you for, that's another hungry. Anyway, I saw clips of it, didn't see the, go ahead.
So Noah, the main guy in that band, hold on one second.
Go ahead.
Thank you for everything. Yeah, just call if you need anything. Yeah. Sorry, I was hosting a band at my house.
No, dude, come on, dude. No worries, dude. We can edit this out. No problem with
it.
Yeah.
So this guy Noah, I ran into him in Switzerland, in Zurich. I was touring with this band, All Them Witches, and he plays with one of those guys, and so he happened to be there on tour, and we met, and he was a fan of my record, and I think he showed it to Michaela, and then I think she showed it to the guys. Is from everything that I pieced together, that's how it happened.
I love this, dude. I freaking love this, dude. It's great.
What's that?
I just love it. That's just so organically perfect.
Exactly. And so I wasn't aware. I knew who Circles was, but I'd never seen him before, and didn't know any of those guys. And really, I mean, didn't know what kind of the foray into the jam world was going to be like. And by all accounts, everything was really positive. It was a really good time.
Well, so let's just be clear about this. You would say that, well, how would you, I hate labels. I hate doing this, but I realized I saw this line where, you the jam found you, right? You didn't find the jam world, but you kind of got stuck to it. You got tethered to it, and it feels good. But what would you, were you playing? I can't see you playing any kind of Formula Trip music regardless. You never entered. What would be the, I mean, I was listening to the newest album last night. It's like, this, like, I mean, I feel like I'm in like a cathedral with no Pope. There's no verbal words. It's just you're going higher and higher
Yeah.
and higher. And yet you're telling me you were never in the jam circuit world, or was it always a prog circuit? I'm just trying to figure out what circuit.
Yeah, I mean, well, this kind of came. I didn't like set out to do this like with this. I mean, I
Yeah, of
just
course.
ended up making the first record like on my own. And then just really had to reverse engineer having a live show and stuff. Like I just did this with collaborators and just like for the sake of being creative. And then it kind of, my manager and good friend helped me release the first record. And then it's just kind of been, we haven't stopped since, which is kind of similar to like how Circles started. It's like they weren't fully planning on this like being their livelihood.
No, not at all. In fact, I think I have interviews with Mac and Neely and I'll send it to you because both of them were like basically hoping that, you know, the music would be low enough at the show at the 50th anniversary where anybody would just ignore it and they could just kind of crawl under their seat and just go back to whatever they were doing before, and then everything just exploded.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
I was talking to Adam about that, and he was like, yeah, we didn't realize there was going to be like 100-some thousand people like packing their bongs and like grabbing another beer to this music, and then
you know, and that's the cool thing. It didn't. I think the magical part of it, and I don't know who made the call, but maybe it was Justin Kreuzman. But they didn't wait for intermission. They played it before the show, and that to me was magical because that was the first melodies that the fans heard. So because continue on. You would say that like
I guess like, you know, I've always been really driven towards improvisational music and experimental music, whether that's, you know, like bands like Can and Amandul or spiritual jazz or The Dead. You know, there's always Santana, all that stuff. Like anything psychedelic and improvisational has always.
I love it. It's all over your face, dude. I love it. Dude.
Yeah. But with the jam band world, aside from The Dead,
I agree. No, I know where you're going with this. I dig. Continue. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I dabbled with it a bit, you know, in the 2000s, and would go to some of those festivals and stuff. And I like a lot of that stuff. It's just not what I seek out. I'd say more, but it's like, I don't know, where do you draw the line? Because something like Can, you listen to their live recordings from the early 70s, and it's like, it's totally freeform improvisational. It's, you know.
Well, I just think, you know, to me, it's like, it's, I remember this, my dear buddy, my dear uncle, George Marsh, who played with David Grisman and Jerry Hahn Brotherhood and this, and you know, he was just like, he's like, I see a lot of these bands today and the music doesn't move. Because at least in the Grateful Dead, there was rhythmic movement in the band.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that just comes from the idea of, you know, I don't know, there's a variety of things, but a lot of the jam band, whatever that word means, I mean, it comes down to just sort of, you know, wanking it, so to speak, you know, you know, and it's it doesn't get me off, you know?
Yeah. I had a bit of a weird taste in my mouth going into this. I just wasn't sure.
Sure.
Because, again, like with the Soul Band, another one of these like learning experiences, we kind of got lumped into that world because we flirted with that stuff, but we weren't that. And it never really worked. Like we'd play like after parties for like Perpetual Groove or something like that.
Sure.
And it was, I don't know, it just like, it didn't leave a great taste in my mouth because it just seemed like people didn't really care. And so I was a little bit hesitant. And then like after the first show of this tour, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, these people just love live music and are really open to it. And it's like I am these people, you know?
Exactly, dude. Dude, I got chills right now, dude. This is unbelievable, dude.
Yeah.
It
was and maybe Circle's crowd is a little more in tune with just being open to new stuff. But yeah, it was cool for how fairly different we are musically, how well it paired and how great their audiences were, really.
I want to ask, this is really important, talking to Rich Ruth here on the Jake Feinberg Show. You know, how much, so it was a blast. You connected with interstellar family members, and it's beautiful. Like the whole thing is just so cosmic.
Yeah.
How hard is it? Not, and I don't mean it as listening to the new album. How hard is it to be able to perform those songs in a 40-minute set? Because you know what, like because believe me, it's really interesting actually, because I spent some time listening to the album, and I always get off on people or musicians who go out and road test songs and then go in the studio. And in this case, it's like
it's the complete opposite.
And yet I've never said this to one musician, and I wonder if it's just a time issue, is that I felt like those songs really, I felt like the time constraints hindered some of the tunes. You tell me. I mean, is it hard to do that?
I would love to be in a setting where we could stretch it out more and just, it limited. I mean, the set is probably, about 50% improv, 50% like on these themes. And yeah, I mean, honestly, this is the first time I've played the same set a bunch of times with the same group of people, because it's kind of a rotating cast. And so what was great about that run was like finally getting to just sort of carve out what the set was, instead of having to
throw
together a rehearsal the day of the show because two of the guys haven't played the set before, and it's kind of like getting through it, which is always fun and exciting, because I just work with like great players that can, I just leave the interpretation to them. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a blast though. And I would like to experiment with having 90-minute sets or longer and just take it all the way out there.
Well, for instance, like it was so psychedelic for me, because like the first night I look over, and when you announced the band, that drummer, it was my first ever foray into new media, my first Facebook Live video ever, 2017 on the Rocks Off cruise in New York with Wolf, Scott, and that drummer was young, and he had like sort of like punk metal tendencies, but you could see he could swing a lot, and I'm like, there he was again. And I'm like, and that, I was like, this band is on fire, man. I mean, so you're telling me is that going forward with this project, are you going to be able to keep this group together? Because to me, I mean, it seems to me like it just, the music felt good, and no matter how much it is fun to be spontaneous with people that don't know it, after a while you do want to gain that level of trust. You want a language with these people.
Exactly. And I mean, Taylor, who you're talking about,
thank you, Florith.
I speak highly enough of him and give him enough credit.
Oh, he's an amazing drummer, dude. Yeah,
transform like the live material to something. So I've been playing a weekly gig with him in Nashville, kind of mostly during like the pandemic time. We just play every like Wednesday night at this dive bar with this great crew we just do like instrumental covers.
Oh my God, get me out there, dude, immediately, dude. Jeez.
Yeah, and so I've been playing with him weekly for 2 years, and he just became a good friend of mine. And when it came time to put a band together, it was like wasn't any question about who was going to play drums. And yeah, and I didn't like fully realize his like pedigree with Wolf in that world until we were literally up on this Northeast tour, and it was like every show we went to, someone would be like, "Yo, how'd you get the guy?"
Dude, it blew my mind. No, cause this is the thing I want to ask you about, because when I saw him in Connecticut, I said, "Man, I can't believe it's you. I haven't seen you in a while." And I said, "How's Nashville?" And he's like, "It's treating me very well." I wonder if this is just one of those things. Like if you go, the guys I've interviewed, like Keltner and all these cats, they didn't want to leave the studio scene in L.A. because if they did, they might not get called for studio sessions.
Totally, yeah.
And I just wonder if Florith, or if some of those, when he said that to me, I got the impression that he can sing for his supper as a musician, but in Nashville. But is that one of the reasons it's hard to keep a cohesive unit together? Because if people leave, they're not going to. The phone won't ring as much.
Well, yeah, and there's just so many touring gigs here, so it's like, and I feel like Taylor. I mean, he's only been here a couple of years, and I feel like word's kind of starting to get out a little more that how great he is. And I just feel really lucky because I know he truly like enjoys what we're doing, and I think just places a priority on like playing music that's different and exciting. And yeah, but no, and he's definitely been sinking into that world. I know he's getting a lot more calls for session stuff, and yeah, he's busy for sure.
I mean, I'm still we gotta get to the bass player as well, because that dude is just nasty. I mean, it's just unreal. But I really need you to talk about the first time that you connected with Sasquatch. I mean, that dude fundamentally blew my brain open on multiple levels, dude.
Yeah, he is.
I need to know the first time that Rich Ruth connected with Sasquatch. What was that?
Man, it was up in the Upper Peninsula in Michigan.
Wow.
My old band we'd play this festival up there called Farm Block. That was just like a small, kind of low key, kind of cosmic festival. And we went up there like 7 years in a row, and it was just kind of the same people, mostly from Michigan. And it was mostly just like an excuse to like go way up north, up by Lake Superior, and like chill out for a couple days. But he was kind of a fixture in that scene. He's from Kalamazoo, but that whole Michigan world is very tight and insular. And so, yeah, quickly connected with him and just saw him. He would sit in with like everybody at this festival. And he would also, one of my favorite things about him is that every year he would lead this thing called the Sax Summit. And it would happen on like Sunday at like noon. And he would gather every sax player that was at this festival, sometimes like 6 or 7 guys of varying pedigrees from, virtuoso level to almost like...
Yeah, rubber bands around the horn and shit.
Like
yeah, I did. Street scholars,
and had their horn with them. And it'd just be this like 30-minute, just 7 saxes just like going nuts. And it was like very experimental and abrasive and beautiful. And so that always like...
No rhythm section? There was no rhythm section?
Oh,
this is unbelievable. Pandemonium, dude.
And so Sasquatch would kind of lead that. And he'd have a few little like motifs or themes that they would kind of play on. But I mean, yeah, it's like the saxophone is just, it's the most expressive instrument we have, I think. It's like you can make the most heinous, demonic sounds, or it can be the most beautiful thing in the world. And so... in the 30 minutes every year of the Sax Summit, they would explore all sides of those parameters. And so when it came time to put the band together for this run, my normal kind of main collaborator on the sax is my good friend Sam, who plays most of the sax on the records.
Really? Okay, so what's that cat? Because was he the one that played on the most recent one too?
Yes.
Dude, he is. I mean, that dude knocked my socks. Because I thought that was Sasquatch, but I realized that now who's this cat? Sam who?
His name's Sam K. He's an Indiana guy. He just a phenomenal wind player. I mean, he can play flute, he can play bari, and just one of my best friends. He came into my orbit in like 2016, and when I started kind of piecing this together and wanted some different voices, I just brought him in, and it like just transformed it to something that was bigger than I was, and so, but because he's like such a monster musician, like there's not many people that can like cover his ground on the sax for like a live show. So it's like, I was like, I need someone good and someone who's down to tour. And, this isn't like we're just out here slumming it on the support gig. So it's not like I can like pay people very much. But I knew Jared would be down, and he sank into it fucking perfectly. And it took 1 or 2 shows to kind of carve it out a little bit and just kind of figure out how to make it sit nicely. And by the 3rd night we were off. And
so this was the first live opportunity for you and Sasquatch to play.
Yeah, we had one rehearsal before the tour.
Oh, that's great. That is so great.
Yeah. But yeah, he's a force of nature in all
I mean, yeah, no,
manners.
absolutely a force of nature. Some people call Jake Feinberg a force of nature, but but I mean, that's it. I want you to just talk, and this is really important because my prayer is that you'll be able to keep this band together and do some regional touring. Just keep touring the band and grooving the music and getting that sound.
Yeah,
But so and it happens to a lot. Like I'm not going to get into the whole story, and it wasn't that big a deal. But your music is dance music. I can dance to arrhythmic music.
yeah,
I mean, I can dance to anything. And to me, it's not your natural like hip hugger, Booker T and the MGs. Like it doesn't
right,
have those kind of like dance floor. It's certainly not like circles. So it's
right.
like so the expectation is that people are gonna sit or stare at the band. And I just want to know from the musician's point of view if you want cats to get off and dance because to me, I had a guy come up to me at your show and at the Fairfield show, and he was like, "Hey man, my boys they just want to see the can you move off to the side?" And I was like, part of me was, and it happens everywhere I go. I'm like, I just sort of was like, all right, I didn't say anything, but I was like, do they have legs? Can they move? Like they're opening for circles. Let's
Yeah,
have a ball. I mean,
yeah,
you
exactly.
want the band. It's just not some classicalized thing where people are
No,
sitting and
no.
applauding. And can you just talk about how to because it's for me like Sasquatch could go off or you could be playing and you may not be able to tap your foot to it, but you can let the body dance. I want you to talk to
Yeah,
people about the expectations. I don't know if that's the right word, but the
yeah,
fact that you
no.
guys want people to get down.
Yeah, I'm well, and like I said, man, it's like this is kind of new territory for us in general. Like we had played a few shows in Nashville and a few festivals, but it's like we hadn't been out there on the road like playing for a new audience every night. And so I was still kind of figuring out like
Yeah,
how
yeah.
what this is, in the live setting anyways. And I think one of the things I'm most excited about is that like one, it can work like in the jam world, or it could be at a jazz festival or like an experimental thing. And what was really refreshing to your point was, I'm used to playing shows in Nashville where it's like people just kind of stand there with their arms crossed and like, it's a bunch of musicians judging you, which is,
Fucking
makes
whack shit, man.
yeah, makes you play better, but it's not always the
No, it's
most like
just too
inviting
square. No,
setting.
exactly. I mean, it's just go ahead. So people got unhinged though at certain points.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and but going out with circles, it was like almost every night, and the Fairfield show is a little bit more because there was actually seats there. Like it
Dude,
was a
that
little
was the
more
best fucking
sterile.
venue I've ever been in my life. That was like a
That is
studio,
a
man.
great
Oh
room.
man, dude. Go
Yeah,
ahead. Yeah.
props. Shout out to the stage one in Fairfield.
Big
'Cause that
shout out to
from top
that
to
for that
bottom was the best
pandemonium.
room we played.
That is sick. That's so great because that was. I felt like I was watching like you know Weather Report or Mahavishnu from like '71, like in a small little
Oh
like
yeah.
folk club or something. It was sick.
Yeah.
It was sick.
But what I was saying though is that like every night I'd look out while we'd be playing, and it's like people would just be moving. They'd be spinning around and like dancing
Good.
and stuff, and yeah, and it's like we're not playing like groovy kind of disco-y funk music at all. But it was cool to see people still engaged and yeah, it was great. It was a nice change of pace from like what I'm used to.
You know, when did when did you realize that music was going to be a healing force for you in your life? I mean, to me, like, uh, there's nothing wrong with psychotherapy. I definitely spent many hours in psychotherapy, but
Yeah.
I don't in the last few years, especially. I mean, I love music, but I love the people, even the musicians, even more.
Yeah.
I often wonder, like I guess it's a twofold question. When did you realize that, even though maybe society was saying, "Oh, you can't be a musician," but it felt so good and it was so healing for you, and ultimately, like coming off of a tour like this, how do you recalibrate? Because for me, like I don't go. I have too much at stake in my life to go into a dark place. But I just,
Yeah.
it's hard to. All of a sudden, you start to feel like you're the gravitational pull's pushing down on you because you don't have that high vibe anymore. And I just wonder, like for
Yeah.
you, how long it takes if you throw yourself back in immediately to the music. Do you give yourself a few days to recalibrate, and how hard
Yeah.
is that? Like sort
I
of.
usually, yeah, I mean, I usually kind of am a bit of a hermit when I get home. You just got to like decompress.
Oh,
And touring is just so stimulating in every way. It's like the highs are high, the lows are low. And, you're, especially when you're like, you're your own tour manager, you're hustling the merch table. It's like you're out there talking to people constantly and just giving so much energy in every facet of the gig, whether it's driving to the venue, loading in, or selling merch, or just playing the show, And so it is exhausting. And I've been out like constantly this past year and a half. I also tour with this great artist named SG Goodman.
Wow.
And so her schedule is really busy. And so, yeah, it's like when I'm not doing that, I'm like trying to do Rich Ruth stuff also. So yeah, I can be pretty spent when I get home, but I try to always, but I find that like, if I'm out for like a month and then I come home to like the studio, that's when a lot of my best work comes out of me. Cause it's just like, you're exercising like your chops. And so you get, and like with these synthesizers and stuff, it's like, I'm finding these new ways of like engaging with these complex instruments that when I get home, it's like, oh shit, I know these effects and these oscillators like in a different way because I've been using them every single night performing. And so then when I get home and with like the sort of meditative like healing quality, it's like that's like the other side of the touring coin is when I can just hole up in my studio and I'll be in there for like 3 days pretty much nonstop just working on new ideas.
Is it?
And that
Yeah, I mean, like when you're on stage, like in one of the freeform moments, you wind up hitting some clams that turn into the magic notes, like, and then you come back home and you're like, wow, that was because some of this stuff has to be, because like that's the best part. I mean, the stories of people hitting clams and like that made it onto the hit record, like David's, it's, and I'm just wondering like that to me is like it's not. Maybe in the moment you're like, oh man, that was a clam, but then in reality you're like, no, that's a gateway.
Yeah, absolutely. And with with the amount of weird sound processing that I'm using with synths and pedals and stuff, it's like there's always going to be this balancing act of just like riding this line of using all this gear and hoping that it works the way you want it to. And sometimes it doesn't. And so that's, like you're saying, like that's when some weird magic can happen.
What, going back in time, I mean, I just, I wonder about your influences, your synthetic influences. Like, do you go back to Silver Apples of the Moon, Subotnick, Dr. Patrick Gleason or George Duke? I mean, who are some of your? I mean, maybe it's more modern stuff. I don't know. I'm just sort of caught in that original. When I just remember John Hurd talking about the bass player talking about first time he saw George Duke with one of these ARP synths, and it looked like one of those old telephone operators. And I just wonder how far back in the lineage your influences in the synthetic world are.
Yeah, I mean, it does go back to a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly George Duke is, I mean, in every way, he's an inspiration. From, like,
dude, such an inspiration. I got to send you those interviews, man. Oh, my God. The guy is unreal.
But see, I guess what drew me in is, I took, like, some piano lessons as a kid. I have, found rudimentary knowledge of chord structure on piano, but I'm not a keys player by any means.
I dig.
And so I think in the maybe 2009, 2010, I was in college and just absorbing every new weird musical thing I could find. and I guess started getting into like craft work and
Dig.
can and stuff like that. And then Philip Glass. And then I got into this experimental group from Ohio called Emeralds that does this really out there, beautiful ambient drone with a lot of like arpeggiators and just these gorgeous synth textures. And and this was before like analog synths were accessible and affordable. It was like back then, like unless you wanted to spend like $3,000 on like a new Moog, your options were just like.
What year? What was this? Like early 2000? What years were this?
Like 2008 to 10.
Yeah.
And so I never thought like, I always thought like, oh man, if I could ever afford analog synths, like someday I'll have a studio just like filled with them. Never thinking that would be like an achievable.
And now it's totally there.
Yeah, that's my life.
Oh, I love it, dude. You're ensconced with those, dude.
Yeah. So I've always been drawn to this open-ended side of synthesizers, and I've kind of in some way like protected myself from like fully understanding what they do. I don't want to know. I like there just being a bunch of knobs and menus in front of me and just getting into like this sandbox zone.
Oh, I love, dude. God bless you, because that to me is like, that's anxiety 10 times for me. I love that you're ready to dive into the box and sit in the mess.
Yeah, but I don't. It's like if you start talking to me about LFOs and VCS, it's like
you tune out
because synth people will like talk to me about that shit, and I'm like, dude, I honestly don't.
Yeah, it's just like stop with the wonky. We don't need any. This isn't a wonkish thing. Like, let's just fucking burn. Let's have a ball.
Yeah, and so I like this ability to create emotional textures and sequences and repetitive things and loops with this medium that like you can kind of engage with without having to be technically good at the instrument. You can. To me, it's just like another world of sound, and where most of my ideas start is just kind of just playing with these synthesizers and just finding something that strikes the chord in me.
It seemed to me in my somewhat altered states when I saw you that maybe you just sort of do exactly that. That you weren't too busy on the synthesizers. Maybe you'd hit some sort of sonic texture, and that would go off on a loop. I oftentimes just saw you sort of in a very cerebral, almost orchestrative mode. Was I reading that correctly? It wasn't like you were flying around on that thing.
No, it's not like I'm like Herbie Hancock up there like ripping solos.
Yeah, you're not Jan Hammer or whatever. I dig. Yeah.
But yeah, I like it. I like that you can just kind of like you can just hit a chord and it'll just keep oscillating while I play guitar, and then it also like creates a tone that then everyone else can move around. And like Taro, my bass player, it's like he's running his bass through all these reverb pedals and stuff, and so it's like everybody but Taylor is like capable of making drones and these kind of abstract sounds. Like Sasquatch is running through all these pedals and stuff, and so it's just I don't know. It's like I think the meditative quality of like a drone is like something that obviously it's something that has surfaced in all kinds of music around the world for forever, but I think it's like an underutilized just method of grounding what you're doing.
You're nailing it, dude. It's you know what it is? Well, because that tambora would be, back in the day. I don't know if there's this one album you got to check out. My dear uncle, late great Pat Martino.
I love Pat Martino.
Okay, I don't know if you know the album Baina, but
I don't know if I know that.
Dude, I'm gonna send you the dude. He's got a tambora. He's got Charlie Persip on drums. It's like fusing East and West, and so that was used in sort of a world East-West jazz setting, and then. But a lot of that drone stuff is now used for sedentary yogic meditation. And yet it should be. I love how you're using it, and I don't want the secret to get out, because that shit can be used in a sonically expanding environment tenfold, and it can keep people grounded in the groove. I dig.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, and I think like, yeah, you listen to a lot of Indian music or experimental krautrock stuff, and it's like, or the Dead even, you know, like in the space settings or a Dark Star jam or something. It's like that same quality is present, and so it's always something I'm trying to work with and play with. Or like a lot of spiritual jazz too, like Alice and Pharaoh's stuff is pretty, you know, it's like one heavy riff and like a sitar droning while these unbelievable players just like spin circles around it,
or like,
know?
yeah, Pharaoh's like yodeling or, you know, chant.
Yeah,
It's unreal.
exactly.
It's true. It's you know, Rich, I just wanted you, this is just sort of like came into my head, but you know, I wanted you to talk about, you know, how you've kept your heart open to people and to just sort of the mysteries of life. I know that, I mean, it was written about you basically being, you know, essentially your life was threatened. You were held up at gunpoint. You know, and yet, you know, I mean, some of this, and then just being on the road, and you know, you know, just having to deal with the drama and the politics, and it, you know, even guys like McDougal, who is like my favorite. I mean, I love him so much, but he's also like, he can be cynical, you know. I mean, just because he's been out there, and like I want you to, you know, to me, like the one thing I can say, because we were only treated to, you know, 45 minute sets from Rich Ruth, is just, I'm like, this cat is just, he's got a great aura and a great light, and that only exists if you keep your heart open. And I wonder how you do that, considering you've had some, as many people do, some slippery and jaded situations.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's weird because I can't like separate those experiences from what this music is to me, and like, because it was kind of a series of kind of fucked up things that happened, but basically I got held up at gunpoint by a kid that lived like 3 houses down from me at my old house, and at like 9 a.m. they stole my car, and it was like while I was making the first record, and so we were like, you know, just dealing with the trauma of all of that, and like having to go to court and all this shit and get my car back and press charges or whatever. We were tracking what became calming signals, and I think it I don't know, it just added a new layer of like meaning and I guess like healing quality to the music. And I think it was something that it kind of, and then a series of other things related to the carjacking happened with these same people, and we had to move. It was, you know, it was a nightmare. And so then while I was making this record, I was doing a lot of EMDR therapy, kind of retracing all this stuff and just trying to move on and properly compartmentalize this stuff so it's not just bouncing around in my brain every day. And so it just and it was 2020 too, so it was like, you know, it just felt like the world around me was in full chaos mode and inside of my brain, like with this PTSD. And so I think I really was, and I was listening to a lot of spiritual jazz and free jazz while I was working on this, and I was just so struck by, I mean, just the power of that music and how at times abrasive it is, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, and so I was kind of, with the first record EP I put out, it was like, I was kind of lumped a little more into this like ambient world, and I was like, well, should I like stick with just that? And then I was like, you know, listening to McCoy Tyner records and like Ascension by Coltrane, and it's like, man, this shit is like not very peaceful.
No, it's peace as a burn, as burning, exactly. Absolutely burning.
It's catharsis.
Yeah, exactly.
You can tell. I mean, especially Ascension. It's like, you know, it's like you have arguably the greatest living musician in the world at that time, who had just put out like the masterpiece, and then he follows that up with like a record that to this day is like, it is intense, man. You
A
know?
lot of cats have a hard time getting their ears around that particular, even though Train's albums are, but there's a burning urgency, and ambient music, at least the word itself, doesn't correlate to that.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And so I wasn't, when I'd listen to these records, and I was like, man, I don't feel peaceful. I don't feel calm.
Like, you know, right.
And I still turn to ambient music and like these drone qualities, whether I'm creating it or just listening to it, like to help center myself and feel calmer. But at that point, it was just like, it didn't feel like the music that I was trying to express matched that, because, you know, there was like riots in the street and the world was shut down, and yeah, everything just felt fucked up. So I tried to lean more into that. And I was like, you know, if Cole's Train can make Ascension, it's like, there's no reason why I can't have 2 minutes of sax just making atonal freakouts on my record, because who's gonna judge me? Who gives a shit?
Dude, you know, and that's the, when you like, that is, but going back to the this is the thing. I mean, Neil Cassidy said that, I've been saying this all morning for some reason, and because it's grace beats karma all the time. Yeah. And in order to be graceful, you had to, in this dysfunctional individual, 3 doors down, whatever, stealing your car, holding you over. I mean, to me, like, there's so much there that would be prohibitive for you to forgive. Were you able at a certain point to get to a point where, and I don't want to say like, you know, but just so many cats, and a lot, going to the free jazz thing, Pharaoh, Albert Ayler, all these guys, you know, these guys, all the jazzers. I mean, you want to talk about getting held up at gunpoint, getting arrested before the third set. I mean, this is the blues, and they're freaking this stuff out in the recordings, because that's their life. I mean, so I guess it's a twofold thing. I mean, do you feel like making that album, some of that pain rubbed off on the album itself, and were you able to ultimately forgive these individuals who really were part of the madness of 2020?
Yeah, I absolutely have. And I mean, it's so weird to, like, I don't know, start to recount things that happen in your life, right, and like what leads to what. And it's like, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's like sometimes you need a heavy wake up call to like prioritize.
You're damn right. We all do. We all get it too, man. We all get it. Yeah.
And so, it's like that morning, fucking July 5th, 2018, I walked out of my door and like my whole reality changed in the span of 5 minutes, like for the rest of my life. And and it's something that I've been processing a lot. And I do forgive those guys. And I know, I don't know, that was like part of the EMDR stuff, was just being able to, I guess, just zoom out on the whole thing and realize that it's like, I was just caught in this crossfire of these people's difficult lives that are a lot harder than mine. And now I have like a career partially because of it, which is crazy. So,
explain that. You know, so I mean, explain how that led to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, it just like tied all these experiences to the music and made my focus on what this music means to me something extremely real and like visceral. Whereas before I was just experimenting with these ideas and textures and stuff. I'd always been into experimental music and krautrock and like Steve Reich and minimalism and all these things, but it was this perfect storm of kind of studying these traditions and trying to understand like what breathes life into this music. And then all of a sudden something happening to me that was the thing that, you know, breathed life into what I was doing.
Exactly. That's real life.
Trauma, and it was dark, but it just added new meaning to it all.
Do you have, were you ear trained before you learned to read music? Have you been in the academy at all, or are you totally a street scholar?
It's pretty informal. I mean, I still can't really read music.
You're the kind of cat. I mean, I just have to tell this story because it's like Mike Knock, great piano player from the Fourth Way, was like, he was just playing like at a seminar in New York, and dazzling, and Hal Galper, who's a teacher, great piano player in his own right, was like, Mike, how did you do that? Explain how you did that. And he's like, I don't know. And it was driving him nuts, but like, to me, it's like, a lot of the magic in music, I don't care what genre it is, it's the fact that when it just comes through you and you haven't been codified in the music to where you can't really explain it. And people are very hung up on all this intricacy and huge facility today and chops and this, that, and the other. And it's like, dude, and I wind up staring at the wall, dude. I mean, it's just, I'm bored to death with that shit. So I dig that you're, sort of, on the razor's edge, so to speak,
Yeah, that's how I like it too. And I also, my goal is to bring in people that are that good and have those people play on the records and be in the band, but give them these minimal parameters and then just this kind of, I guess, this like loose roadmap of like, hey, here's what this is. Feel free to like, I just want people to be themselves.
Dude, that comes through. So it's so beautiful because that's the way I would want to be. If I was on the bandstand, I just would like to have a little bit of a sketch, contouring it, and then let cats be themselves. Yeah. That's the ultimate band leader right there.
And that's how I make the records. It's like I have this amazing like crew of good friends of mine that have all contributed to these things. And it's like, okay, once I have an idea, it's like, okay, I have 3 sax players to call. Is this like for Sammy? Is this for Jared? Or is this for Caleb? And it's like, I just try to pick the zone that musician can fully be themselves in. And I don't really ever tell them what to do. It's just like, here, give me like 3 takes of you doing something over this minute of the song, and just always being surprised at what happens.
How much do you, I mean, it's for me, like I'm going back and, finding happiness during my day, going back and, watching the video clips I took and, ruminating on that. But do you have a tendency to sort of, I mean, during the tour, you're doing too much to really perseverate or romanticize on certain things. But I do notice younger generations, I mean, I'm 44, but younger cats too, like people like just, I mean, they get caught up and in their own, they're so into their own thing and they can romanticize and they can listen to the stuff over and over again. Are you someone that's kind of like, well, that was that night and that came through me and now it's time to move on to the next thing? Or are you somebody that, when you need to pick me up, you go back to that special night in Asbury Park or wherever you...
No, I try to just keep moving.
I love it, dude. Like, straight ahead, man. Straight ahead.
And sometimes it is pleasantly surprising to be like reminded of something. And like, for example, we did an album release show for this record in August at Third Man at the Blue Room, and I kind of had forgot that they had recorded it. And a buddy of mine, a really great mixing engineer, just like sent me the mixes, and it's like I hadn't heard any of this stuff in 5 months, and was like, oh shit, like wow, this was a really special evening, and like I'm so happy that it's captured. I think we're going to release it in the next like month or so.
How long did you get to play that? Was it like a 90? That was a longer night. You could stretch out.
It was probably like 70 minutes.
Wow. And 70 minutes of Ruth would put me in the ethos, dude. Ethos. Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah. Keep an eye out for that one. It's cool. But yeah, in general, I try not to. I just like to move forward. I like to keep moving. I don't want to.
I dig. No, you're not that's why you have fanatic. Fanatics can get stuck. And then fanatics go forward, but that's what fans are about. I mean, where's one area that you are sitting there this morning or this afternoon and saying, okay, I have to push myself out. I mean, you strike me as a pretty fearless person musically, but if there's one area that you need to push yourself out of your comfort zone on the bandstand or even from just a leadership point of view, what would it be?
I think stretching things out, like, is because we haven't really been, and it's like, especially now that this jam band world has kind of, like, I've kind of just serendipitously, like, happened here.
Yeah, well, I
And
mean, yeah, that's, go ahead. I mean, that there are no coincidences, so it was alignment.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And you mentioning that you'd like to, as, like, just the listener, like, would like to see it expanded upon. It's like we've been kind of confined to 45 to 60-minute sets, and it's kind of a nerve-wracking thing of, like, how we do that, but it's something I want to do, because it's like, you listen to, if you listen to, like, an old recording of, like, a Pharoah Sanders live or Coltrane, it's like there's, like, long portions of,
Oh my God, 26
of
minutes of just
full
insanity.
out there
Yeah,
improv,
totally.
you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And so it's like, how to channel that kind of energy and still make it part of the journey and make it accessible for people. Like, I also don't ever want this to be too esoteric that, like, my mom can't understand it.
I dig. No, this is a really important concept, because I would just say that, like, there, part of me really digs what. I mean, one reason Miles turned his back on the audience is because he didn't want to see people's facial expressions. He didn't want to be
Yeah.
he didn't want to be reacting to those kinds of, sort of, I would say almost insignificant things. And then Lee Morgan, same way, they'd be like, the philosophy was like, hey man, we dig what we're doing, and as an audience, you may not dig it, but we still dig it, and we're gonna play it. Like Bill Graham too was like, when he put those bills together, bands like Malo, or Sons of Champlin, or the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, he goes, I think it's people need to hear this stuff, and I want them to dig it. And so part of it's like, we're so into placating and pleasing and customer service and all this other crap.
Right.
Now it's like, you have to get off, if you have to get off in order for the audience to get off. So my only suggestion would be, like, if you're confined to that 45 to 60-minute thing, then take a page a little bit out of the playbook of the of course the Dead is at the top, but you take, like, you find, like, 3 tunes that, there are certain passageways, maybe 12, 15 minutes in, that you could just go directly into the next tune. So it becomes like one long piece where, and yet there's 3 different tunes in there. And it might go over the people's heads, but it never stops. So you're in a complete, as an audience member, you're in a complete sonic bath. And you then have, you could essentially, have 8 to 10 minute areas of tremendous improvisation. That's just a thought from the peanut gallery,
Totally, man. Yeah, and I think as we continue to do it, like, we will for sure expand on that, because I don't want to just be playing the same thing every night.
No, and it felt a little bit like the Rubber Band could have kept stretching out, and yet you were like, well, we gotta. We got
You're
it.
not the first person to tell me that too. It's like a lot of people are like, man, I wish you would have just played that one song for, like, 8 more minutes.
Some great grooves in there. There's a little bit of a flavor. I mean, there's like a gumbo quality to the music, because it's just there's there's like different flavors. So you want to try to. Does it also speak to your own ability to improvise? I mean, that's the one thing I love about the cats that I go and see. That, I mean, they never repeat any ideas.
I think that's always an exciting challenge, and it's like, you have to view it like that as a player. Just be like, find new ways to challenge yourself, to use new sounds, to use new patterns, and that's always something I never want to lose that, like, drive to do that.
There's something to be said for, like, taking as many bars as you want, but after a while, you just don't. You want to make it so that you're not repeating anything. I just felt like, for you, like, I thought it was a pretty damn good first go around. And before we're gonna have to do set 2 with Rich Ruth, because the guy is just a ball of fire. But I just want to wrap up. I need you to tell me a good Dan Horn story from the tour. The man is like, if you want, I mean, if you really,
Oh my God, I
the
got
man,
you.
fundamentally, I don't know, I can't explain it. He's a bit of a shaman.
Yeah,
We don't have long
he's
conversations.
on a different plane, man.
Hey man, I just want to tell you something. I mean, he fundamentally changed my life 4 years ago. I don't think I've done a bunch of interviews with him. It's always like pulling teeth because he's not a loquacious person per se.
Yeah, yeah.
But but he's a shaman in a certain way, and I just want a great Dan Horn story from the tour.
Okay, I'll give you a quick one.
Yeah.
So this was, you start these support tours. It's like I'd never met any of these guys. I'd interacted with John a little bit on Instagram and had heard good things from mutual friends and stuff. So like I knew it was gonna be
totally
good vibes.
Yeah.
Like hadn't ever heard anything.
But still, I mean, I can't imagine walking into that and not knowing. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, with my like history of doing this, it's like the right move is to, when you first start this thing out, like be as hands off as you can, like stay out of their way, don't bug them,
Right.
Stay out of the green room, like just be courteous. And immediately they were like super welcoming. Everyone was a little stressed out like the first day of the tour. Just they had been in Mexico and like Dan had like lost his Alembic bass.
Oh no, I know the generator died down there. There was a
There was like a whole.
Wait, wait, the plane lost the Alembic?
Well, I think they had actually left it at a venue in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh my God, that's fucking great.
So he went and bought a Rickenbacker like the next day, and then the Alembic showed up like on the third or fourth show. So this is my Dan Horn story.
I can't wait.
Which also I didn't know until talking to him that he like did all those Cass McComb records and played in his band, which
absolutely
is so cool because I love those records.
A lot of great upright, yeah, totally, yeah.
But this was in Albany, so like the second show, and we're just in our corner of the green room little apartment, and we're like about to go on stage in like 15 minutes. And he comes in there and he's like, I'm going to Target. Does anybody need anything? He was dead serious. And then like we're like, oh, we're good, man.
Yeah.
I think we're good. And he's like, oh, yeah, cool, man. I was just checking. And then like after the set, I like saw there was like a big Target bag in the green room. So he actually like drove the Sprinter to Target for some reason.
It's not out of the realm of. It's so funny. You go backstage sometimes after a shred show and you're like, "Where's Horn?" And he's out in the middle of the night riding a bike around Santa Cruz or something. But there's I'll tell you, man. It has been such a blast here for 63 minutes. But do not ever get off your path and stay connected to those who you can feel really true vibrational love from. I know you know that, but there's so much in this.
No, it's good. It's always good to hear again.
There's just so much dissonance out there. So don't.
Yeah, and this shit isn't easy. It's tough. It's tough to make a living and stay healthy.
I will say one thing. I mean, that's the thing. The night of the Fairfield show, I went back and saw. That was actually a beautiful green room, and I don't know where your band was, but
absolutely no, that was
a pimp. I looked at Horn. I said, man, how's your health? Like how are you feeling physically? Because like, to be honest with you, if Mac and Horn and John Lee, like if something happened to them, it would really alter my life a lot. I mean, God forbid. So he just looked at me. He's like, yeah, man, it's kind of unsustainable. So. You're up against it, man, and that doesn't mean it's not possible. It's just, you got a lot of self-love and you got to stay always connected and vulnerable to those people like those cats. So, I mean, man, I can't wait to do it again, brother. And if you're ever, I don't know, in that other band you're in, I don't know if you guys ever come to the Southwest, but it would be.
Dude, actually, I think we're playing in Tucson.
Don't go there right now. All right, let's check. I want you to check out. Even in Arizona, I'll come and see you guys.
I know we're playing Phoenix, and I think we're playing Tucson.
All right, you get back to me as soon as possible. And when is that? When is that tour? When is that tour going on?
It's like late February, early March.
Oh my dude, Rich Ruth, dude, we are blowing the roof off the place.
Yeah,
dude.
yeah. You got to come out and.
Oh, we're gonna be hanging hard, dude.
It's a whole different ball game, but it's equally.
Hey man, I'm open to it all, baby.
It's like it's like Crazy Horse backing like Bonnie Raitt kind of vibe. if that translates.
Well, you know what? No. So it's Well, you know what? Just you bring that insanity, and we're gonna raise the collective consciousness. If you're coming to Tucson, I'm gonna lose my mind, dude. So get back.
Yeah,
Man.
Yeah, I'll get back to you shortly on that.
Yo, man. Much love to you, and bless you, brother.
Dude, thank you, Jake. This was great.
All right, man. We'll do it again. Be cool.
All right.
Yep.
Be in touch, man.
Peace.
See ya.
Yep.